Basically, a group comprised solely of people on the autism spectrum, and when we say spectrum, when people hear autism, you meet maybe 1 to 10 people of the same type of autism if you've met them. Spectrum like a rainbow, there are so many different people of so many different types on the spectrum, and each of the people here represent some of those varieties. Now then, in order, we'll discuss some of our fascinating people here. With this gentleman, Simon Huebner was fortunate. I'm never going to get that name right.
Nobody does.
Sorry. Simon Huebner was fortunate enough to receive good advice to help him develop coping strategies for his learning disability. He earned a degree in geology from GSU and started learning about ASDs, autism spectrum disorders, and surrounding issues while applying his degree in the oil fields of West Virginia, really, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Eventually, he understood he has a unique skill set and perspective based on his own trials and tribulations growing up as a student and pushing himself past what he thought was possible after entering the workforce. Will in the way. He learned and continued to learn by observing others about the best practices to assist and advise on issues faced by students and family members for whom ASDs are part of their daily lives. He has been on the founding board of the Tapestry Public Charter School in DeKalb County and currently works in an office where he was helped throughout his formative years. He believes that every interaction, whether with students, teachers, faculty, or family members, is a learning moment for everyone involved. And that is true because no matter what you go through in life, with every person that you interact with, your life has changed. So let's welcome Mr. Simon Huebner. Okay, I got it wrong again, didn't I?
Don't worry about it.
Okay, next up. Ms. Kayla Rodriguez. When it comes to struggle, definition of what you go through in struggle takes many forms. Even without autism, there's always going to be many challenges you face in your life that shape you. For Kayla Rodriguez, we would call her a veteran of such struggles. Her identity is shaped not only by her autism, but by her existence as an LGBT. The similarities of persecution and misunderstanding between the LGBT and the autism has allowed Kayla to bring another unique perspective to ASAN Atlanta. Finding people who didn't look at her being autistic or lesbian, but who she is as a person, Kayla has found a community of empowerment to give herself positive belief in who she is and what she can do. The kindness of her friends has given Kayla the determination and means to transform her life into one that she hopes to obtain through her own 2 hands and build her own future. Through her future, Kayla seeks to serve as a leader who will help both the autistic and LGBT communities find a future of acceptance and empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Kayla Rodriguez. Next up, Mimi Sapra. Mimi represents many of us in that one of her goals throughout grade school was to make friends. I can't see any reason why not. Before her graduation from high school, she and several other friends in her school's autism program exchanged numbers for the sake of having friends to speak with after graduation. As she pursued to obtain degrees in 2 different colleges over the years, her friendship circle allowed her to always have friends to spend time with, confide in, ask for help, and more. Thanks to the friends that she's made, and friends being introduced to her through her friends, Mimi has gone through incredible changes as a result of exposure to different situations, events, and experiences. Through her growth, she's been able to obtain employment performing skilled work at a small business. That will gradually allow her to take on new responsibilities and go further than before. This is the 2nd time that Mimi has spoken on a panel at a school, and it won't be the last that this young lady serves as an advocate, which will empower her to continue taking the initiative and seeking independence. Now, we were going to have an autistic entrepreneur businessman who was going to be joining us, but he couldn't make it. Miss Marion Klein, if there's anything you would like to say, since your bio was your own.
I wasn't able to put a bio together, though Aaron moved heaven and earth to help me. My name is Marion. I'm 55. I was recognized, not diagnosed. I hate pathologizing terms when talking about learning differences. I was recognized as autistic when I was 42. So I had 4 decades of being painfully aware that I was inexplicably different from other people. I have a perfect verbal IQ. It's really easy for me to speak. So a lot of people think that if I'm not succeeding, I'm not trying. I know the rules, but I don't care. So I was, pounded with labels, lazy, careless. Nobody could have cared more or worked harder than I. So finding myself over the last, I can't do math. I'm looking at my geologist husband, 14 years, I guess? I don't know. Anyway, learning who I am and understanding my life through a different lens has just been really amazing. And more I feel comfortable in my skin, though it can sometimes feel like I'm wearing a sandpaper collar all the time.
Okay.
I'm an artist too.
So for Miss Marianne Klein and Mimi Sapra, let's give them a round of applause. I think the introductions are over. Shall we begin?
Sure.
All right. Simon, we'll start with you. What would you think would be something important for people of a grade school to know about for the autism community?
What would be something important to know? Look, that is a hard one to answer. Because I didn't know certain things had a name until I was about 15 or 16. Something might be a little bit strange compared to what? I got a family friend, 91 years old. She sees her oldest kid when he's in kindergarten. This is in the 50s. It's about nap time, and everybody has a strange little tick right before they go to bed. So it always kind of amused me when a lot of quirks and characteristics, all of a sudden I'm supposed to believe it just magically happened. It's always been around. Now I guess at y'all's it. I was off topic.
It's
At
okay,
y'all's,
go on.
hold on a second. Okay. At y'all's age, there might be when y'all are teenagers, young adults, what I've noticed is you're going to be around people who they want to fit everything into their head. It's compartmentalization does not come natural. So it's really all about knowledge and patience. Just knowing the right question to ask and staying patient.
Thanks, Simon. Kayla, what would be something you would like to share with people about your experience with autism?
Ready to speak.
If you want to, go ahead.
I prepared a speech. If you all would just, okay. Hello, I'm Kayla Rodriguez. I am 20 years old and I live in Beaufort, Georgia. I am a 2017 AADD, aka All About Developmental Disabilities Ambassador, and I'm also involved with ASAN, aka the Self-Advocacy Network. I have multiple disabilities. I am autistic, I have OCD, PMDD, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, type PTSD, and type 1 diabetes. I like to speak about autism and how it has affected me and who I am as a person. Autism spectrum disorder affects the nervous system in several ways that is different for everybody. That's why it's called a spectrum disorder. For instance, some people with autism can talk, and some cannot. Even though I can talk, autism still gives me a lot of challenges that affect me every single day. The challenges autism gives me are, for instance, making me sensitive to loud and certain noises like sandpaper, making me sensitive to certain textures, making it hard for me to adapt to changes and make me not think about others' wants and needs. It also makes me have high anxiety. It makes me have meltdowns. It makes me speak loudly and repeat myself often. It makes me a picky eater. It makes me have horrible anger sometimes. That could also be caused by being bipolar, I'm not sure. It makes me have social skills challenges, which makes it hard for me to make friends. It also makes me not deal with stress well. I get very overwhelmed easily due to my autism. Because of all of these challenges, I had a really hard time in high school. I went to multiple high schools and was stressed out all the time. My education experience was not the typical education experience. No one understood or cared to understand my uniqueness. Now, in 2017, hopefully more people have a better understanding of what autism is. My teachers did try their best to help me, but they weren't helpful because they couldn't stop the bullies. I took all the classes that were required to graduate from high school. My hardest classes were my Spanish class and math class. See, not all autistic people are good with math, and I learned that the hard way. Spanish is hard for me to learn, which is funny because I'm Puerto Rican. I hope I'm not the only autistic person who has problems learning a language. I didn't really have a transition plan coming out of high school. If my schools ever wanted to help me, they should have given me a transition plan and dealt with the bullies. Now, my current life is kind of boring and lonely. I don't really have a job or volunteer anywhere, so on the weekdays I just stay at home exercising and playing video games. I love doing things with my friends, but I only see them on the weekends. I love going to places in my community like the park. What I like to do for fun is play video games and hang out with my friends. I do a lot of the former, but not enough of the latter. I am interested in programming and writing and being a self-advocate. I don't like sports at all, and the only club/organization I am involved in is ASAN. Now, why am I telling you all about myself? To show all of you that even though I am autistic, I am still a human being. This is what I want neurotypical people, aka those without autism or any mental disabilities, to know about autism. That people with autism are still human beings. I might have something in common with some of you. I also want you to know that autism isn't bad. It's not a disease, it doesn't need to be cured. If you cure autism, we wouldn't be who we were meant to be. I want neurotypical people to accept people who are different than they are and accept us for who we are. I also want neurotypical people to know that because we are autistic, it doesn't mean we lack empathy or we are violent. Quite the contrary. Most of us are kind, caring, and peaceful people. We also make the best friends ever because we are honest and loyal. If someone with autism is violent, I want neurotypical people to know that that autism doesn't cause them to be violent. Autism doesn't cause people to be violent like the media says it does. I hope more people will see that. I want the stigma against autism and other disabilities and mental illnesses to finally end. Despite all the challenges autism causes me, I'm very proud to be autistic. It makes me feel good about myself because it uniquely enhanced my life. It enhances my life by making me able to see the world differently and making me different from everyone else. I notice things that others don't. I can focus on details that others pass by. If everyone were the same, life would be boring. That's why I love being autistic, because I am different and unique and I see the world differently because of it. I prefer is autistic instead of has autism, because has autism makes it sound like autism is a disease. Autism isn't a disease. It is a part of who I am. It is a part of my identity. I am not ashamed of it at all. You can't separate me from my autism. Without autism, I wouldn't be myself. The phrase has autism makes it seem like I can be myself without autism. It is a part of me forever and I'm proud of myself. Without autism, there would be no me. I'm meant to be autistic because that's how I was put on this earth. So to all neurotypicals, including all of you, please accept me and my community for who we are so we can try to make this world a better place for all of us. Thank you.
Well done. I can see why Kylie is so sad she's missing out on this. All right, Mimi,
Okay.
why don't you go over some of the challenges that you've overcome and what you think challenges should be overcome through, well, you got
Yeah.
it.
Well, hello everybody. I am Mimi Sapra, and I am from Alpharetta, Georgia. I am 29 years old, and I am autistic. I have overcome many challenges in life since early childhood. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 4 years old because I had delays in speech and language, but until I was diagnosed with autism, I barely spoke, which meant that I only spoke in 1 to 2 word sentences. By age 4, I attended the Walden preschool at Emory and started speaking 5 to 7 word sentences. Well, autism has presented some challenges for me when I was very young. My hearing was sensitive, and loud noises such as thunderstorms, fireworks, and even music had bothered me a great deal. Over time, my hearing had become less sensitive so I could enjoy music, enjoy fireworks like on the 4th of July, and handle thunderstorms when they occur in a better manner. I became aware of my autism since I was in middle school because autism makes me different because I had to learn social skills which did not come natural to me, and that's the case with other autistics as well. And I attended 2 colleges and got 2 bachelor's degrees. I attended Cornell University Women's College in Gainesville, Georgia, and majored in liberal arts. And then I pursued my second bachelor's degree at DeVry University in computer information systems with a concentration in web development. Well, currently I am working for Care Now Services in Roswell, Georgia, which is a mental health clinic that deals with the mental and psychiatric health of geriatric patients. Geriatric means elderly. And these patients suffer from a variety of mental illnesses such as bipolar, major depressive disorder, or different types of schizophrenia, to name a few. And these patients live in nursing homes all over the state of Georgia. And there are doctors, nurse practitioners, and social workers who help these patients. And telepsychiatry is also used for these patients by doctors and nurse practitioners because a lot of these patients live in rural areas where the distance is too far for their loved ones to take them to clinics. So doctors and nurse practitioners talk to these patients over a computer, even at my office, so that they get the medical care they need.
What's some of the work you do with Care Now?
At Care Now Services, I do mostly medical billing. I do professional crossover claims. I do PASSAR claims. And a month and a half ago, I started billing Medicare deductibles.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell them about how far you've come?
Well, I have made a lot of improvements as over time. Some of the things I did was that I've overcome a lot of sensory overload. Like, for example, like say in India, the streets have a lot of traffic because it's really populated and a lot of people honk their horns. And how I overcame that sensory issue, like when I was 8 years old, but when I went back in 2013 and this year, I faced all that high stimuli successfully.
Well done. And the social skills, why don't you point on that one?
For social skills, I have made a lot of friends over the years, including these friends right here. And I'm continuing to work on broadening my social circle some more and also meet even more people outside the autism community as well, along with my friends in the autism community, so that I can, do more fun stuff with people, particularly on the weekends when I have the most free time, so that I become more social and not be alone so much.
It's important to note that one of the things we most it's easy for us to make friends on the autism spectrum, but what many autistics love more than anything is to make friends with the neurotypical community, people outside the autism spectrum who will understand them. It's hard, but the ability to do so is incredibly rewarding. Mimi, great job. And now, our artist.
Miss Mary Klein. Is there anything in particular that,
You mentioned to me that you had the artist mindsets, and from what you told me in the email was quite fascinating. Outside a neurotypical's view, would you like to tell these students about the mindset that through which you deal with the world?
yeah, I'd love to. There's a model of neuroatypicality that it's simplistic, but it's very useful. There's a spectrum along which people think sequentially or holistically. For me, I cannot comprehend the world in sequential terms. I'm time blind. I do not experience time, just like blind people don't experience color. I know what it is. I have a million alarms that go off to warn me that such and so time has passed. Ordering tasks or tasks within a task, very, very difficult for me to do. My kind of thinking is I take in everything. My brain does not assign saliency to all the information coming from my sensory
And
organs.
from saliency?
Importance, priority, relevance. So I'm getting everything. I'm getting the lights, I'm getting how my clothes feel against my skin when I move. I'm getting the sensation of my body in space, in the chair against my back, my arms on the table, colors, faces, sounds, everything at once. And so I become easily overwhelmed. But the gift is that since everything comes to me at once, I can see patterns, interrelationships, intra-connections, all the things that make of something an organic whole. By organic whole, I mean something that has properties that can't be deduced or explained by its parts in summation.
And let's just explain that. For the intraconnectedness, she basically sees everything connected in a way that you would normally see through time, or things that shouldn't normally be connected, two random things having a similar bond. And by trying to find those connections, she still tries to bring together something that you can't exactly break down into saying, okay, here's how something can be explained. What we love more than anything when we're faced with something is being able to explain it to ourselves or to someone else.
Yeah.
But what happens when you find something that just doesn't quite have the ability to be comprehended? For some mindsets,
Yeah.
it's rather fascinating. Go on.
Yeah, so I can say I can look at a tree in my backyard and I start thinking about the roots of the tree, and I start thinking about the process by which nutrients are pulled into the roots from the ground. And I start thinking about how the tree in the springtime and in summer collecting photons, collecting light energy, and how that's changed into ATP ultimately, or glucose, and on and on and on. But like I just see the things as a tapestry, the fabric of the universe as being of a piece. And that's not a very practical skill to have, because it is hard to convey what my vision is of something. I'm constantly going to my husband and saying, "Isn't this fascinating?" And he'll say, "Yeah, it's interesting, it's interesting." So bringing things things excite me so much that I simply can't convey in words, and so that's why that's why I'm an artist is, I'm a non-representational artist, and it's a way of giving voice to things for which there are no words. So, I don't know if that's what Aaron meant by
If greatly in part.
is there
Do you have more?
lots more?
Alright.
But, you know.
Alright, let's have a big round of applause for our applicants. Now we're going to transition into questions soon, but I do want to cover a bit of the summary regarding the stuff regarding our leaders and how it applies to high schools or grade schools in general. Several things about autism that have been talked about. One is the comprehension. You guys were going through the sensory issue, the information overload. For different types of people on the spectrum, they require different types of learning techniques. And with respect to the teachers, teaching by itself is hardly easy. So when you're given students in your classrooms that you're trying to teach who are on the spectrum, you have to relearn a different method. That makes it difficult for the teachers understanding from their standpoint, but it helps the teachers with learning different ways for helping the autistics themselves. One of the issues that was touched on was bullying. One thing that bullies will always look for when they're looking for a target is someone who is different, not necessarily out of place, but also lacking social skills. Since we have a great deal of trouble communicating, knowing what to say or how to say it in grade school, many of us are often prey for those bullies. And, well, dealing with the issue in general is often hard for the school system. You may have heard a lot of reports through the news, possibly for those of you who use Facebook, about different bullying cases in schools. For those that are alone, what they need more than anything is a friend. I don't know how exactly students can make it easier for people on the spectrum to feel more welcome. Possibly teachers can come up with some group projects for the autistics to do with the neurotypicals. Possibly give extra credit for helping out people on the spectrum. But one thing that I've definitely found that is useful is that the autistics and the neurotypicals both learn from each other, whether in grade school and in life, just through experiencing their different circumstances. As was mentioned, trying to find different things to talk about. We have so much that we want to say. We will try to get involved in conversations even if what we have to say is no longer relevant. If being able to taught how to keep pace with what's being discussed, an autistic person on the spectrum will be a great contributor. We soak up knowledge like sponges. We may not necessarily be good at math, or we may not necessarily be great at psychology, or maybe we'll be somewhere in between. But our slower processing on information allows us to retain a huge depth of knowledge. So if it comes to a few subjects which they're involved in, which you guys may want to talk about, we can be great contributors. One way or the other, our choices, both those of the autistics and you of the neurotypicals, shape each other's futures. So when we say the future is in your hands, for each of us in this room, you hold the ability to decide your future and someone else's. It's amazing how a single choice can affect each and every one of us here. But you guys have that power, and that is a beautiful thing. I actually envy you guys being in school right now and being able to make such a difference as you are. I know each of you are going to do great. And with that, what comes to the questions?
I asked Aaron if it would be okay if I brought an artwork, and he said yes. And we talked for 3 minutes about it. And I told my husband this, he said, yeah? Well, no. So I don't have anything here. I'm actually working on a piece that's just for nervous energy, but after the panel, I'd be delighted to show you the work that I have on my tablet. Like I said, it's non-representational, it's abstract. There's no subject. What I really like about it is that each viewer engages with my art in his or her unique way. There's no right or wrong. I ask my friend, what do you think of this piece? And they'll say, oh, but I don't know anything about art, I'm not trained.
It's fascinating, I'll say that.
What, this?
It reminds me of visionary art style.
What's that?
Something that defies comprehension. It's not easily put, you can't put a word
I
to
think
it.
I understand what you mean.
So why don't you just hold it up for a quick bit?
This is just something that I'm doing as
Am I holding it right?
Huh? Yeah. It's digital art. I have an iPad Pro, pencil. I'm not really here to be an Apple evangelist, but I am an Apple evangelist. And doing digital art has been just a fantastic thing. Yeah. There's such a range of brushes, and it looks like watercolor and stuff like that, and I can learn even more about color and experiment with color and stuff like that. So, I've been doing art all my life to give voice to this something that I couldn't put into words, and I think it was something that really saved me.
So using that analogy, the problem with communication, not being able to take thoughts from your head and put them into words out of your mouth. For some people, it's not exactly easy, and the same as in we don't grasp the body language, the social skills, the cues. We have to find a way to get the image and knowledge out of our head and into the world. Art is one way. You meet one type of art, you've seen only one type of art, and there's so many different forms. And just for the negative energy. For many of you, don't you have some type of study aid while you're taking a test? Chewing gum. Some teachers give you chewing gum. It helps the stress. For autistics when they're communicating, some type of squeeze toy to hold in their hand. For speaking, it's a necessity. You don't have to be autistic to do this. There are plenty of neurotypical public speakers who have some tool. Here's a question. When most people speak, this table, the bottom here is hidden. Part of the reason for that is so if a person's hands are fidgeting, or if they're squeezing something, or if they're holding something, it's so the audience can't see it. Less stress on the speaker, more ability to focus, and everything moves on. So, next question.
I have a question. I want to hear more about what it was like in the sensory experience.
Well, I guess for me it was pretty frustrating because I felt like I was focusing so hard. We were supposed to like mark down the amount of times we heard a word that started with S, and then at the end Katie asked us some questions, and because I'd been focusing so hard on like not listening to the noise and not feeling the sandpaper on my neck and everything that was going on, I like didn't know the answer to any of the questions. And so I guess for me it was like very frustrating because I felt like I had worked so hard, but then like I got everything wrong, so to someone else it would have looked like I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't trying, so.
But you were trying so hard and you really wanted to get it done. And
you were really frustrated that you couldn't.
Yeah.
Like you thought, I'm okay, and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I think all of us are going there for something like that. Now you're starting to see part of a
Yeah.
different world in that way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask for questions right away. Take some time to let the information process in your head. That's what we're thinking.
Sorry.
Perhaps our teachers would like to have some questions.
Well, I really want to hear back. I'm glad you asked that because we haven't had a chance to debrief on the activity. So I'd love to hear from anybody else.
I think for me,
No, you'll go right after her.
a lot of it, there's just so much going on that I just kind of shut down and just like not focus on anything. And, you know, I just wanted to rip everything off, rip the call and rip the headphones.
Shut down how? Like burst out, overwhelm,
Like
freak out?
just not pay attention to anything. Just, you know, Katie was talking, she was reading, and we were supposed to be listening for the S words, and I just like zoned her out, like wasn't looking at anything, and it like, I feel like it takes a lot of energy and restraint to keep focused and stay on task when all of that is going on at once.
and you would wonder how other people might deal with this. In the same way that you guys were wondering when you were for the autistics to wonder how do the neurotypicals do this. It's a bit basically seeing from each other's shoe, not necessarily taking a mile in someone's shoes, but sitting down at the classroom seat in each other's shoes. Now, how about you, Miss?
We talked a little bit after the demonstration, and one thing we noticed is kind of we read an article last night about how the autism spectrum was like a circular thing where people were in different places and as far as different things, and we noticed that in the class too. For some people, the collar was the biggest distraction, but for me it was the lights. The collar wasn't really as much of a distraction at all. So it was just interesting seeing the different.
And now here's a question. Was the material used the same way for each person?
Yeah.
But each of you, for some reason, even though the material was presented the same, each of you experienced it a different way. Nobody's the same. And each of you guys think differently. And so now you understand the part about the circle or the spectrum. What was the name of the article, if I may ask?
It was an article I pulled from the Mighty. It's the one about the color wheel.
Having some good ones so far. Yes, Miss.
I was gonna say that, because we're talking about different things, the most different in all of us, what was most distracting, and I think for me, the lights were most distracting. It was hard for me to concentrate with strobe lights, I guess.
If you were to try to remember just a little bit back, I won't ask you to go full recall, that'll be a little unpleasant. What do you remember about the strobe lights as you were trying to do it? What were you thinking at the time?
Well, I know personally for me, my eyes, that I have a light sensitivity in one, so it was really hard for me to try to look at Katie while she was trying to speak and also see the lights flashing. So I was looking straight on, the lights were coming from the side. It's they were kind of blocking everything quickly, and then also just that as tired as I felt when I took everything off, I felt exhausted, and we did that for maybe 10 minutes, and so going through a whole day, I couldn't even imagine how much energy that takes up. So I think I kind of can appreciate that aspect of it more. Just yesterday we talked about that it was really hard for people to use the RPM boards. We had a panel yesterday about that.
About the prompting method?
Yes. So we had a panel of kids who were using them, and they were talking about how that was really tiring for them, but even just trying to focus was exhausting for 10 minutes.
And let's point out something else. When we said that I did the hit me in the questions, some of you guys were taking some time processing what you wanted to ask, trying to find something to ask. Now, in each class, whether in grade school or in college, you have a limited amount of time in which the teacher is trying to give notes, you have to take notes, the teacher has to give assignments, and there's a limited time to ask questions. So basically they expect you to ask your question in under 10 seconds. Wasn't it a little hard for you guys, neurotypical, to process enough information in time to get what you wanted to say out of your head and to us? For those who have a slower processing speed, regardless of the volume for data, it gets harder. Now, here's something I actually like to ask. How many of you have dealt with or seen some form of bullying in your lives? I'm actually curious. And if any of you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. So, who's a taker?
I personally have been bullied, so.
And did you find anyone willing to help you?
In this particular case, I was
So,
It's really helpful for me to be reminded that it's not just we who suffer or suffer.
we're connected in more ways than one. Bullying affects everyone who is isolated or stands out.
Something might be a little bit off in different situations. But every time, this has happened a few times where I've seen an autistic person get cut off, or an Asperger person get cut off in conversation. And I'm like, oh really? Now who's got the social problem?
It's a key for many of us when we have so much we want to say and it gets changed in a new direction, the conversation shifts, or they don't get to finish taking out what's in their head and out into the social environment. But be honest, if someone cuts you off and when you're trying to talk about something that you're feeling passionately about, or you want to say, wouldn't you get a little peep too?
Yeah, like I seem to have that issue, like when I'm like talking about a subject that I'm passionate about or need to clarify it or talk it out if it's something that's bothering me. Like when I get cut off and to a different subject, it's frustrating to me because then I feel like I have to just end the conversation and move on to the new subject rather than finishing the subject that I'm still finishing.
And there's still so many points that you want to make in that particular area.
Yeah, and also there could be times like maybe if that particular subject, like they feel like if everyone's reluctant to hear about it, or maybe I think in my mind they give, maybe like say everybody gives it a bad rep, even when it's really not.
And
But-
too often there's no way for us to tell whether you guys are interested or not, or have the time, etc. We're not able to read that. And often the dealing with it is enhanced, so it's often a problem.
And another thing is that there have been times that people have labeled me as one-sided or selfish.
But that's not the case. It's only how they viewed you due to the stereotypes, and because they weren't giving the understanding, which is the understanding that's needed within the grade school system.
And I find this in life also. Or like maybe if I'm forced to be cut off because maybe like I'm not, like if I feel as if I'm not allowed to speak for myself or speak about a particular subject.
And
Or
thus
like
the
if somebody
feeling of
gets-
powerlessness.
The feeling of powerless is like maybe somebody just tells me to not talk about it, like, you know, like I'm 29 years old and I should be allowed to, you know, talk about those subjects once in a while. Maybe I'm really realizing like it's not a good idea to do it all the time, but like occasionally it's okay. But even if it's occasional, it should be okay to bring it up. And sometimes I would avoid bringing up certain subjects, like maybe if I feel as if people were gonna get upset with me if I bring it up, or be reluctant to talk about it.
So
we didn't want to
process.
take the chance. It was like it's scary to take the chance of
Yeah.
leaving out there with something that's really intriguing to you, and then
So
when
finding the time.
like stopping short and suddenly realizing that people are looking at you weird, or that somebody's not really interested, and it's humiliating, right?
Yeah, because I feel like if I wanted to say a few words, it should be okay, even if it happens once in a while.
So let's keep that in mind. Figuring out the time, place, and relevance for something that you're passionate about may not be easy. And if you've had experience with making the mistake, choosing the wrong time, place, or relevance, it hurts, it gets hard on you to be willing to just talk about anything in general. You're worried that you're going to make that mistake. You're worried about how the other people will see you. And that terrifies. The worst thing that we want is to keep making mistakes and have people be looking on us saying, oh look, they're going to open their mouth and make a mistake again. We don't want that.
Is that just autism, or is that something?
It's
That's pretty
pretty
universal.
global, I would think.
But for the autism, the problem is the inability to pick up on cues, to process the information in time, to perceive. It is a learning and behavioral disorder, and this is part of the problems where it's most significant. Now, there are going to be people who have it based on lack of experience, but our issue in being able to process, to pick up those things that normal people, it flows to them like water, it becomes a bit more difficult.
And another thing I want to say is that if there were people, like if it's close friends or family members who behave cold and critical towards me because of my autism, I feel like that's something that hurts, and because it makes me feel as if these particular people are choosing my family over me because I'm autistic and they're not autistic.
Exactly.
I have that, at times I have that problem, and it kind of breaks my heart if it's a family friend or a family member.
Exactly. Now, one more thing before we'll switch back to you guys for the questions. Because we're not always able to process the information in time, pick up on the kids, etc. I believe someone was talking, I believe you were talking about some of the TV shows and stuff.
Yeah.
So we look to works of fiction for hope in trying to understand people. And Well, there are always some helpful ones, there's some unhelpful ones, but ones that have too much sarcasm, not necessarily the best. But how are we to know which one is right and which one is not? So controlled environment you mentioned?
Well, television's a controlled environment. A lot of stuff that people might find solace in is a controlled environment. Any television show, any writer's room would have about as many people as there are in here now trying to figure out what do we put it, how do we set up a 20-minute episode. So that sort of thing is a situation of too many cooks in the kitchen.
So too many perspectives from different
Hold on,
sources,
hold on
how
a
do you
second.
know which
Hold on
one's
a
right?
second. Hold on a second.
Yeah,
Hold on a
I
second.
have a
Aaron.
problem.
He's still talking.
Condense Aaron.
Our meetings are a ton of fun, I just want y'all to know that. No, but I just, wanting to sit still is not always natural right now. Kind of wanting to steal the show right now, kind of is. But you want to try to bring it up the comedy or the improv or things that require planning out a strategy. Things that allow, well, or should I say, giving yourself enough time to plan the strategies for a game of strategy or something like that. That's the sort of thing where you realize that I almost lost that train of thought. It was a big deal to me to find things that were not a controlled environment because I felt like my mind was functioning clearer, a little bit clearer, just a little bit faster. And, well,
And I think there's been a lot in the conversation about having different experiences and the way that people's brain works, and there's been some connection between kind of both sides of the table of how our brains work and how we think about things, and we've been able to relate to each other. But I have a question that I'd like to propose to all of the panel. Is there something that you have experienced or learned because of your autism? And I think there's always, and you guys have hit on that at different points. And we've talked some about deficits and some of the difficulties of having autism. But like all of us have learned, sometimes when there's challenges and there's things that are difficult for us to experience and work through, we learn something typically through that experience. So my question would be, what is it that, is there something specific that you have learned that autism has allowed you to learn or express differently, but specifically because of your autism?
Marianne, we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you. I have something to say.
You all are going to say something about this.
I have, having been so misunderstood myself, I really like to meet people where they are. It's really important to me. And I know that within, what can I say to you, within everything and everyone, there is a spectacular singularity. We are each a spectacular singularity. There will never, ever be anyone like any of us ever again in the fullness of time in all of the universe. That's something that I just know because of who I am, but also I think that I learned not to make snap judgments of other people, to stay away from words that have opposites when it comes to people, like good. Well, if I say something's good, then I can also say something's bad, or so I try to, talk to people in neutral terms. I want to know what it is that makes other people spark, what makes other people really interested, and I have a skill of drawing people out, because I'm genuinely interested in what very few people have been interested in me, but I find that when other people do have an opportunity to explore, to talk to somebody who's like, oh, really? Tell me more. Then everyone wants to share.
Mimi?
Like, oftentimes with my autism, I could be misunderstood. And besides, when I've been labeled as one-sided or selfish, there are other labels I would have had, been labeled as is like controlling or wanting to have it my way. And I'm not sure about any others, but whenever I hear those terms now as I'm like progressing, like I feel like ashamed of it or feel humiliated. Is it, like because, with my differences or maybe like the difficulties with comprehending certain things. And I feel like there are times that if that I would be respected by certain family friends or family members if they want me to like discipline the autism out of me.
Have any of those experiences, have you learned something that you think is valuable from any of that?
In some cases, yes and no. Like I think what I've probably had worked on is, I'm trying to think of what to say. Other than one of the issues I seem to have is like kind of like repeat things in my routine, in which it turns out to, to get reassurance to make sure that the routine is stable as is.
Are those things helpful maybe on your job to have that routine, to do things the same way? Has that been helpful?
Like if I maintain like a consistent routine, it seems to help. But when I'm working on my best to, like shift gears on projects at work, because like when I'm in the workplace, I know what I'm supposed to do, because typically when I'm working, I usually like to be working out something rather than sitting there doing nothing for an extended period of time. And at least I come up with a plan to know for when to finish the rest of the work on a given day or a week.
Kayla?
Basically, I've learned a lot about, like, you really can't judge a book by its cover. I know it's a saying, but like, really, you don't know what people's limitations or struggles are, or what they're capable of, and what they can do or what they can't do. And even though they give off a bad impression, doesn't mean they're bad people. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I also learned a lot about myself and what I can and cannot do, and what my capabilities are, how strong of a person I am, and of all that, all of, like all of the stuff I can and cannot do. And I think it's important to know that for anybody, not just for an autistic person, but for anyone, I think it's important to know what your strengths and limitations are, and how you can deal with that, and that's really important skill to learn in life, because you're going to need that when you go to school, when you go to college, when you go to work. It's really important to know yourself, and that's what autism has taught me, really, to not judge a book by its cover, and to really understand myself and what I can do as a person. So.
Thank you, Kayla. Simon? In your experiences, what have you learned about your autism? Or what has autism taught you?
What has autism taught me? Well, first off, I just want to say, my brother had this book, written by Richard Feynman, who wrote a book on quantum mechanics, in which he said, no one knows what quantum mechanics is. That's how I feel about autism. You define something so much, like, now, people define something so much, I start to wonder if the word can lose its meaning. When I was younger and having separate issues from, I swear to God, half the boys must have claimed they had ADD. I'm like, a part of my head wanted to say, Are you sure about that, or were your parents just perfectionists? So I was kind of having separate issues, compartmentalizing, as I'm sure are coming out right now. Now, Amy, I think you brought up an interesting point about people not being patient, claiming one side of this or this or that. And I think that I've had to, I think a lot of us, you and me, we will make our mind up and not budge because we honestly believe we're right. We're not thinking about the consequences. Now here's one of those. Like, I mean, I was a little bit of a crybaby as a kid, which as a boy goes over about as well as you might expect. And then something kind of something happened in my head. Snapped on a good word. The switch flipped. It's like I'm not giving anybody anything to work with. Eventually you turn into this. Which makes people think which made me look more intimidating than I planned. Like I didn't plan to have a death stare, it just kind of happened. I didn't plan to be a statue, it just kind of happened. But, you know.
So, I would plead with all of you to be aware every time you hear somebody use that words like that, or you want to use words like that, to consider that maybe there's a bigger and you have no idea what it is. A lot of people have a lot of things to say about our president and chief, and I have really worked to not say anything violent, because I don't know what it's like to be. I know that somebody loves him. I know that there are people that he loves. That's all I know as a human being. So it's not easy. It's a big ass.
All right, I'll finish off the last part, and then we'll have you ask the final question.
I just want to say something. As Kayla's mother, like you look for, when you have relationships with people, mother, daughter, friends, you look to them for what they can give you and what you can give them. Kayla gives me details. Do you know what I mean? And directions. She's great at when I'm lost, she'll find the way. I mean, I'm an artist too, so I appreciate that, but I'm a realist. And so I see things, differently than anybody. Everybody sees things differently, but Kayla always brings me down to the detail and to the black and white of things. And I think it's important, to that's a very positive thing for me, and we give and take with each other. And I think that, people should look at other people that way, and I think you guys do, you look at your friends and want to take from them, and they give back to them. And that's what, in my experience with my autistic daughter, that's what she gives to me.
For my part, I'll make it quick. The thing that autism has taught me in the world is that no matter how much talented we are, no matter how far we rise up, we do not get where we are on our own. We, as human beings, through one way or another, we only achieve where we are today thanks half in part to us, and also in part to those around you. Your teachers, your friends, your family, anyone. You get to where you are thanks to those who shape your life through experiences. And for those who try their best to get to the world alone, thinking they don't need anyone else's help, I honestly feel a great deal of sadness and sympathy and pity for them, because to be alone in the world is a terrible thing. One way or the other, through events like these, no matter what you go through, you are shaped in mind, in body, in every sense of the way by what you go through in life itself. You are what you have gone through. And Mimi, you had something?
Yeah, I don't know, on a different subject on this, Like besides the selfish, one-sided, and controlling, like another thing like I would have been labeled as is bossy, and like is there any way that the word bossy has been applied to autistics?
That sounds like something that would be very common among girls, which is kind of a derogatory way of saying leader.
And that's true for all women autistic.
Yeah, like does that mean that we mean to be that way, or does it have to do with our autism,
Or maybe the experiences we go through in
or
life.
the experiences we go through in life?
Anyone want to add input here?
Well, I haven't really seen it like applied to people with autism as much, but I've seen it more applied to like women and girls, like in the workplace and stuff like that. Just more used derogatory as like women who are taking charge. So.
Or if you're direct, I feel like it's common too. You're just very straightforward.
Jen, do we have any time left?
I think we should probably wrap up
All
for the
right.
sake of carpools.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to hang around if anybody
We have a few time for a little more questions. So, from our dear audience,
Can you talk a little bit about how everyone sort of has different experiences even within being autistic or being neurotypical? So do we actually know if everyone within a sort of group has the same wiring, or do they just happen to have one trait in common and so that groups them all together?
I wouldn't exactly say it's completely common. There are different similarities within the wiring for the brain, but it can be either the same or different. We still are trying so hard to research autism.
I have a slightly different take.
Go ahead.
That one thing that, and you guys tell me if this isn't true for y'all, but I think that one thing that is common among autistics is the sense that, and it used to be looked at in dictionary for autism, and the definition would be a morbid preoccupation with the self, hence autism. And I have a world apart. Everybody has a world apart somewhere, but I really have a world apart. I live in an altogether different world than you guys do, than anybody does. I don't like to leave the house because this is a cacophonous world. I'm like a turtle without a shell when I leave the house. It's looking at kids during lunch, laughing and talking, and it's like, God, that would be so great. That would just be so great if I could do that. But it's not something I can do. So that idea, is that true for you guys too? Like you have your own universe.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
always in my own space.
Yeah.
I always daydream a lot, and I'm always in my own little world.
Deal with the horrors of reality long enough. You need a little area to pull yourself into.
It sounds like being introverted more than
I
anything
found
else.
advanced past that, like every time, like I balance out spending time in my own world and out in the real world, and I've been doing more with the real world these days.
All right.
I
think
want to do
I just
more
wanna
now
ask
because
something.
I've grown a lot, climbed the ladder.
So you've had successes that, and you feel like, oh wow, there's something really cool about it.
Yes.
That's really great.
Right.
By the way, hey, by the way, I'd gone back to school. Biology didn't go so great, but I did learn one thing. To your point about wiring, the National Institute of Health has spent $1.4 billion over the past I don't know how many years talking about autism wiring. And every experiment, this is just my honest opinion, talks about it's a faulty brain wiring. Can't do this, can't do that. And I will never coach on that model or run a tests like that. We need more funding. Everybody's science. I think everybody's, one thing that I've learned speaking to parents, teachers, or things that I've learned in my office is that everybody's science is going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little bit different. It kind of depends on who gets the poll.
All right, we'll finish this off with Ms. Rodriguez.
I just want to say, I don't know if you guys heard of Julia on Sesame Street, but if you want to see an accurate depiction of autism, even though it's from a Muppet, you should go check her out. Sesame Street, the YouTube channel, has the episode where she's on, so you should check her out. Her name's Julia. I think they did a really good job.
So they did?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
really good.
I want to thank all of you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
We will have the video available. We will send it to Ms. Jen. So I want to thank all of you guys here.